Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'll be repotting my small leaf Linden Bonsai. The last video on this tree was 3 years ago, and in that video I was repotting it. So let's go back in time 3 years ago and see how the tree looked and how the roots looked. And I think the rest of the roots are looking not bad. We just kind of have to do a peripheral prune around the edges to get the tree to fit in whatever pot I can find. So let me find a pot for it. I'm going to try growing the tree in this plastic sort of, I don't know what it is, a colander or salad spinner or something. It's got lots of holes in the bottom, so it should be really good for drainage, which I think this tree lacked in its other pot. I had a look in the other pot and there are just like 4 smaller holes in the bottom, and I don't think it was enough for this tree. So we can see kind of what roots we need to trim back to get it to fit in the pot. So we're going to start doing that. Trimming back. And most of them are just fine roots out here. So you can just scissor prune a lot of these away. It's time to get out the tools and start today's work here in the bonsai zone. In the last video on this tree, I had this as the front of the tree because there was no growth at the back here. There's just maybe a shoot or two. But since then, this back part has grown really well and it's really vigorous. So I'm changing my styling ideas. So I'll probably keep this old trunk as a back branch, and then I'll grow this as the future tree. So an upright type tree here. And I think that'll work quite well. It was always a bit of an ugly duckling, this tree. I called it the ugly tree because, yeah, it just didn't really have any styling plan in place for it. It was just like one side branch and all the rest had died off. So now I can see this growing as the main tree and keeping this as my back branch. So this will probably be the front of the tree somewhere around here. I'll try and get the tree out of the pot now. It's been in here 3 years. It looks like it's loose in the colander. There it goes. So that had lots of drainage holes in it. So I'm hoping that some of the roots were air pruned. The roots grew out of these holes and they dry up in the air, and it kind of develops a compact fibrous root system. Hopefully. We'll see when we start combing out the roots. I'll start combing out the roots now, starting in the center and raking outwards. I'll save this moss. It's pretty nice looking moss. And it's a nice thin layer. And this moss just grew here naturally. I didn't plant it or anything. Now I have to be careful. There's some Irish moss growing in here and I don't want that. So I'll have to get rid of that stuff. Pick it out. There's a little cedar seedling growing here that I'll have to try and remove also. It'll be very interesting to see how the roots have developed in 3 years. Hopefully they've done well. Okay, I'll take this moss away. I'm planting the moss around my witch's tree here. Just kind of putting it on top of the soil. That should grow well this summer. Look a little better too. It looks much better on the cedar tree. Make sure it's all pushed down nicely so it contacts the soil. There we go. Back to the linden tree. Getting rid of all these Irish moss weeds in here. And again, I don't keep them because they develop a really deep root system and it makes it hard to water the tree. It gets this mat of roots on the surface and it's just not good for the health of the tree. The other kind of moss is fine. It doesn't have a root system, and the water runs right through it. So far it looks like there's lots of roots in here. I mean, it's not too densely packed that I can't rake it, but it looks a nice level for repotting so far. Hi, Giselle. Giselle the chicken's walking around here. Now here's that little cedar seedling that I want to try and rescue. It just grew here all by itself last year. The cedars were dropping lots of seeds last year, which is a cycle they go through. It's not very common that they get loaded up with seed cones like they did last year, but I don't know how, yearly the cycle is. I think it's like once every 3 years or something, maybe even 5 years. We'll keep track. We've got the cedar hedge here, so I'll know next time they're loaded with seed cones what the cycle of them is. Yeah, so lots of good roots in here. Did a fairly thorough pruning of the roots last time, 3 years ago, doing a lot of sorting out and trying to get that nice radial root base. And I can see, a lot of it worked well, because I'm seeing a lot of nice radial roots in this tree. Now I'm going to try and get this little seedling out here. So I've got to find the roots. There's a nice red root. Definitely know it's a cedar root when it's nice and red like that. So I don't want to break the root, but it might be tough to get out because it's probably growing between these roots on the linden tree. I'll just get rid of some of this moss. And sometimes you just have to pull the seedling and hope you get enough root with it, which I think will be the case here, because I think they just go deep in the root base here. So I'm getting as much soil around it, away from it as I can, and now I'm going to pull just gently. There we go. So there's the root system on the cedar. Looks like it's enough to support the tree, so I'll put that in a different pot. I like having a lot of variety of sizes of trees in my forest plantings, so I'm going to add the little seedling to my cedar avatar grove, and I'll put it out here in a little sunny spot. So here I go. I'll make a little hole in the soil here, and then I'll try and get the root down into the hole like that. Yeah, that worked well. And then I'll kind of close the hole up by pushing around the soil in that area. And that should do it. That cedar should grow quite nicely there. And it'll give it a little, a new size of tree in the forest, a little seedling. So now I can continue raking out the roots on the linden tree. This was a collected tree. I collected it beside some railroad tracks, and it was going to be dug up. So it was kind of a rescue effort, and yeah, it used to be a fairly tall tree, and it died back after the first repotting. And yeah, it's kind of been the ugly tree ever since, but hopefully someday it'll become a nice looking tree. I'll start to work on the bottom of the tree also. There's a lot of soil down here. It's very wet because we had rain the last 2 days. I prefer repotting when the soil's a little drier, but I've got to get a lot of trees repotted this spring, so I can't work around the weather. You just gotta do what you have to do. no matter what the weather. And then in the summertime, when the weather's nice, you can enjoy the trees without doing a whole lot of work on them. Yeah, so the root base is looking quite flat. You know, it's not jam-packed with roots in the pot. It's, I think it's a perfect time for repotting. A good density of roots in the soil. I'm down to the woody part underneath the tree. So I've got almost all the soil removed. So now I can take the tree into the tub and wash the roots, and then we can start the root pruning. Okay, into the water it goes. I've got my root rake here so I can kind of rake out sections. Don't think the chickens like the neighbor's dog. A lot of roots are tangled here, so I've got to untangle them all. Okay, I think that's good. I've washed it enough that we can take it back to the bench and start raking out the roots. Okay, I want to get the roots all combed out and radial. I don't want any trapped underneath the bottom of the tree. That's looking pretty good. Let's make sure they're all flowing outwards. Like that. There's quite a matted section here. Most of that will just get ripped out. A lot of these fine roots tend to die over the winter. They're just too fine to survive the cold. So they, yeah, you just rake them out. Okay, that's looking good. I'm going to plant the tree in this deep mica training pot. So I want to see how well it fits in here. And this will kind of be the front where you're looking at the front, sort of about there. So it's fitting pretty good. Just a little bit of trimming and the roots will fit in the pot fine. So I'm going to give it a root pruning. I definitely want to prune off these longest ones, kind of keep them compact to the tree. Maybe even a little more compact than that. There. And go around and do a profile prune around the roots. This helps balance the root system. So the vigorous roots get pruned away and the less vigorous ones don't get touched. So it kind of creates a nice equal radial root system around the tree. Like that. Now there's a root here I definitely have to remove. It's growing in the wrong direction. Cut that one back. That one back. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So next I want to fit the tree in the pot, so it might require further root pruning just to get it to clear all the edges. So I'm going to get the front from my view. Which I think will be here. So I do have to prune the roots off front and back just to bring them a little shorter so it fits in the pot nicely. I'm not trimming too much off it. Mostly just those Little fine roots. That fits really nicely now. Yeah, so I'll offset it a bit for that long branch to the right hand side. And that should look pretty good. Twist it just a little more like that. So somewhere about here will be where it's planted. Alright, so now I can start planting the tree. Get rid of those roots I pruned off there. So I have screen in the bottom of the pot. So I'll fill it with a layer of soil. And this soil is 1/2 safety sorb and 1/2 perlite. And there's a bit of pine bark mixed in from some old soil I added to this mix. So okay, so I'm going to position the tree. I've got to check the height, the orientation, the angle, everything. So I think I put too much soil in the pot here. I got to take some out. Let's try that again. I don't want it sticking, the roots sticking too high up out of the pot. That's actually pretty good there for a height. You see that? The roots are safely in the soil, but you can still see the flare at the base of the tree. Now, I think that's looking pretty good. I'm just going to put a little more soil on this side to angle the tree up a bit more, so it's not leaning too much. That looks pretty good. I like that right there. Before I start filling the soil in, I'm going to make sure all my roots are combed out the best I can get them. Well, it's looking pretty good there. Okay, I'll start filling in the soil now. And I'll start working that soil in before I add too much, just so, you know, a layer at a time and get it worked in, and then add some more soil. Okay, I'll add some more soil now. A little bit more over here. So based on the root growth, it seems like, you know, repotting every 3 years at this stage in the tree's life seems about right. You know, as it develops more branches and more growth, it may need repotting more often. Because, you know, the root growth does kind of mirror the growth on top, or the top growth mirrors your root growth. The two stay in balance, so the more growth on the top of the tree, the more roots you'll grow in the soil. So that kind of determines when you repot. Is a slow growing tree doesn't need to be repotted as often. A really fast growing tree needs to be repotted quite often. I'll work the soil into the root base more, making sure there's no voids. It's looking good. Tree's feeling fairly solid in the pot too. So this is a good time to repot the tree. The buds are swelling on it, but the leaves haven't come out yet, so it means the sap has flowed throughout the tree, and the roots will be kind of empty of energy. It's distributed into the tree now. So you prune the roots, and then the new growth will supply energy to grow new roots. In theory, anyway. Here's a view of the front of the tree, and I'll rotate it around so you can see it from all angles. Definitely not the prettiest tree in the world, but it has lots of character. Even though the soil is quite moist that I put around the tree, it's still a good idea to water the tree to kind of settle the soil in around the roots. So here I go. And that should do it. Finally, an update to the small leaf linden 3 years later. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me today in the Bonsai Zone.